politics, protests, human rights, justice, equity, community. RaceAware.
Human subject research is a systematic scientific investigation that involves human beings as research subjects. Great advances have been forged and applied to the benefit and sometimes the detriment of participants and recipients. During this medically historic time, we're on the brink of controlling this COVID-19 pandemic. Is it hesitancy, history, or some other combination of variables that stalls our progress to contain this deadly scourge? Hello, and welcome to the premiere episode of the RaceAware podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Willise Riche, along with my co-host, Tony Suszczynski.
Hey.
Dan Sauber.
Hi, everyone.
How are you guys doing this morning?
Doing great.
We're here because we're aiming to reveal little-known histories, historical whitewashing, exclusionary governmental and corporate policies, and the ongoing impact of unchecked misinformation over a variety of areas. So guys, before we get started and get into this, let's share a little bit about ourselves with our listeners.
Well, this is Tony, and I can tell you that my journey into advocacy and volunteerism started back in the late 1970s. And then when the AIDS epidemic hit, I got very involved with that. I fought for gay rights, women's issues, women's health issues, rights of disabled, and special needs population. And now I find myself very involved with politics. So that's why I'm here today.
That's great. We have a real advocate. All three of us are really advocates, right?
Yes. Right.
Dan, what about you?
Well, my history of social activism started very early in life. At 21, I stood up and marched on Washington, D.C. for equal rights and fair wage. In my 30s, I acted up, and I was an AIDS educator and activist for people with HIV and AIDS, including my two brothers. Later in life, I sat down, literally, and taught self-defense out of a wheelchair for adults with physical disabilities. Social activism is something near and dear to my heart. Now I'm in a new millennium advocating through a new venue with two people I admire and respect. And as long as I'm able, I will continue on because truth really does matter.
Oh, that's great, Dan. Thank you very much for the compliment.
And thank you, Dan, for your activism for so long.
Absolutely. People who advocate should be remembered, the same way you say thank you for your service to others, because it really is a selfless venture. But I don't know about you guys. I don't think of it like that, like it's a selfless venture. I just can't not do it.
Right. I'm the same way. I never felt like I was doing anything special. It's just what I do.
Right. You're just doing what you need to do. Exactly.
And for me, it was my friends were in need, and I just helping a friend.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, as for me, my name is Dr. Willise Riche. People call me Will. Some people call me Lee, simply because they can't seem to pronounce my first name. I have been in the clinical and the administrative leadership for the bulk of my career. I am a motivational speaker. I'm a consultant. I've been involved in advocacy on different levels for decades. Tony loves to say his age. My mom always warned me, don't say my age, but I've been in advocacy for over 30 years.
She's only 31.
Right. And the movements that I have spent a good portion of my time on were medical and civil equity, women's movements, human rights movements, and of course, any election movement or issue that's going forward, I'm on it. I believe that knowledge and the vote is power, and we need to make sure that we embrace that and we use it, because it is our right. That's part of being here in America. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited and I'm honored to be hosting this RaceAware podcast with you guys. I'm glad that, we have this opportunity to do this. It's another form of advocacy, and I'm looking forward to see how far it goes.
And I met you 20 years ago, and whoever thought 20 years later we'd be doing this, so I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, it's funny because we're doing advocacy individually on our separate circles, and now we're doing something together. It's great.
I was on the other end of the country in the Midwest.
We were all in training for this.
I think so.
All right, guys, let's jump right in.
Okay.
All right, so everybody's listening to the news. This morning the news was blaring, and of course the topic is about basically three things: the economy, the COVID pandemic, and relief for Americans that are going through so much difficulty right now. So I want to know, what have you guys been hearing in your circles concerning like the COVID-19 and the vaccines that are out now and trickling out, but soon to be pouring out?
Okay.
Well, for me,
go for it, Dan.
Well, for me in South Florida, one of the biggest issues is distribution of the vaccine. Every state has a different guideline to follow, but we've had people waiting for weeks to get accepted into the so-called queue. It took me 3 weeks to get my first shot. I'm sure it's going to change, but it's been really difficult, especially for our seniors that don't have that ability to get on a website and sit there for an hour and a half.
Right.
That's one of the biggest things I've heard down here.
So you're hearing people are just having a hard time getting into the queue. But basically,
it's frustrating.
And what about you, Tony? What are you hearing?
Well, up here in Duval County, North Florida, Jacksonville, it's very different than what Dan's experiencing down in Palm Beach. Once they announced the website was open, I was able to go on the website, log in, and through my hospital I got my first shot. But a week after that, they started calling saying, we have a reservation for you. They're very proactive up here, as opposed to what Dan's gone through.
Wow.
That said, what I'm hearing is a multitude of things. There's a huge distrust in the vaccine itself for a lot of people because it happens so quickly. There are people who still believe this is nothing more than just the flu and is overhyped for political purposes.
Wow.
There are people within my circle who have been in isolation since last February. I had heart surgery in August, so I've been pretty much in my apartment, other than my doctor's office, since last year. So you've got the extreme people going out partying, going to restaurants, and then me staying home, and everything in between. And then you've got people that believe the vaccine is the Bill Gates microchip, or you have also folks who think it's going to change your DNA.
Wow.
So it's a wide range. I'm hearing all of it.
I heard this TikTok yesterday where the guy was making fun of folks who were saying these things, and he says, I even get 5G, if I stand a certain way, and if my eyes can become a virtual experience.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, it was funny.
I will say this though, on the whole microchip 5G thing, anybody with a cell phone, just go to your Google history. Don't worry about a microchip. They know exactly where you're at anyway.
I know. They know everything you're doing. I mean, you can literally be in your kitchen and say, oh, I got to get salt. And all of a sudden you start getting advertisements for salt on your phone.
It's the truth.
Unbelievable. So
yep.
I'm not really hearing dissension that is being offered on the news, about disenfranchised sect or population having hesitancy towards the vaccine. In the beginning, yeah, but that's like normal. I mean, even physicians were like, I'm not taking that, because the bottom line is, without information, you don't want your physician to just be like, yeah, okay, give it to me and I'm going to run with it. Your physician reviews, even though everything is, reviewed and approved, but physicians still have to review the study, make sure whatever it is that they're going to recommend to you is going to be something that will not cause you harm and be helpful. Some of my colleagues and I were in discussion, and basically the point was we wanted to wait to see the research. Okay?
Right.
Other people that don't usually think, we want to see the research. Some people it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction that they're not going to take it. Part of it is because it was like there's a lack of trust. There's like a low trust level when it comes to certain demographics in this country in particular, and healthcare especially.
Well, I think the distrust is well-founded and well-placed, and I think we're going to get into that a little bit anyway, but I think that's very well-founded and well-placed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we always need to be our own health advocate.
Oh,
yes,
absolutely.
Your doctor can guide you, but you've got to do your own research and be aware of what's going on.
Right.
Yeah, and unfortunately for some people, especially for the elderly people, they just don't do that. They don't do that research. Whatever somebody tells them, they believe.
Right.
And we need people to advocate for them as well.
Just do not go on WebMD and then suddenly say, oh my God, I've got lymphoma because you read something on WebMD. When I say research, I mean do some serious research, not go to one site.
Well, I think what Dan was referring to also is that there's a generation that is from that time when medicine was extremely paternalistic, where basically you just walk in and the doctor tells you what you're going to do, what you're going to take, and you weren't a participant in your healthcare. You were just receiving healthcare.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what are the anti-vaxxers saying?
No.
Wow.
I mean, the sad part about the anti-vaxxers is a lot of them have the science, they have the education, and still turn around and say, nope, I'm not going to do it.
I'm going to be surprised, Dan just said no, because it just seems to me every time I hear about them, it just seems to me that they're the kind of people that if you say yes, they'll say no. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
It's hard. It's really hard to take them seriously. And frankly, some days I think it's almost criminal because I can understand pushback, but when that pushback may be detrimental to somebody's health or even risk their life, it's time to stop.
Yep.
Well, I look at people, I say, I had the polio vaccine at a time when polio was actually a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
I never got polio. I was vaccinated for smallpox. I never got smallpox. I had the vaccines for whooping cough. Never had whooping cough. But then again, I'm on the far left of that. I have in my contact list the Duval County Health Immunization Hotline. So if I travel overseas, I get my vaccines before I go overseas.
Right. But you know what? We've been in the vaccine business for a long time. Frankly, we've been spared a lot of health problems and maybe even death because of vaccines. This is why I don't understand if the data is there. There's always risk, no matter what we're talking about. I mean, if you buy a car, you're buying a car. You don't ask the dealer if I don't think I'm going to buy it if I can have an accident. There's always risk to no matter whatever that we're participating in or taking, etc.
Well, there's a risk for taking a simple aspirin.
Exactly. I mean, people, especially as you get older, you're taking a risk getting out of bed. You could slip and fall.
Exactly.
There's risk in everything. Right. So I want to know, too, do you think it's a lot more media hype behind this fear? Because I'm sensing that people are now, it's almost like, it's starting to feel like it's like a concert. Like now people want to get their tickets, you know what I mean? Like now people are complaining, I can't get my ticket to get my vaccine, you know? Or is it really fear, or is it really a media hype?
I think people are seeing other people doing it, and suddenly it's like watching a particular TV show. Some people think it's not going to be worth watching until they find out everybody else in the United States is watching the show, and then they jump on board. That's what I'm seeing with people. Is now that everybody wants the shot and they see the line of cars, they want to get in line now.
It's cool now, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And I think prior to this point, it was basically tribal politics. So you had one tribe that wanted it and the one tribe that did not want it. Now that time has gone by and people are getting it, I think Dan's exactly right. And I'm one of those few people, I've never seen Game of Thrones. But when Game of Thrones was on, everybody was watching Game of Thrones. I kind of was the lone holdout in the United States that didn't see it. But I do agree with Dan. I think people want to join party now.
You would have watched it if I got on your back.
You said
I'm already on
all the
it,
time.
I love Game of Thrones.
I do too.
But all joking aside, Game of Thrones was in its final season just in time for us to be thrown in our own Game of Thrones. Okay? So we have been doing some 4 seasons of Game of Thrones. Okay? So those of you who watched it, at least you were trained.
Yeah.
And you knew how to live through this. All right, so.
Yeah.
Dan's still laughing.
You can fill me in offline later because I have no clue.
All right. There are general stages to the development of a vaccine. Okay, and basically there's general stages to development of all medication, treatments, etc. Okay, I'm just going to go briefly through the protocol. I'm not going to belabor this portion with explaining it ad nauseum because we will provide the links where you can actually go in and take your time and read over this information that we're bringing to you. But essentially there's about 6 stages, and within one stage there is 4 phases. The first stage is exploratory state, the second, preclinical, then we have the clinical development stage, then we go into the regulatory review and approval, then to manufacturing, and then quality control. In the clinical development stage, we have 3 phases and then 1 post phase. Okay, so we'll have the first phase is where you have small groups of people that basically receive the vaccine or treatment or medication as a trial. The second phase, the clinical study phase, is expanded vaccination to people with the characteristics from which the treatment is targeting. Okay, so basically it's people that this treatment is intended for. Phase 3, the vaccine is given to thousands of people because we want to have a good pool of people so that we can test for efficacy and safety. The 4th phase is a formal ongoing study phase. So as this vaccine or treatment is out and actually being administered, we can measure and follow not only its efficacy and safety, but also for side effects and unforeseen outcomes. For more information on the vaccines that we have coming out for COVID-19 and other even vaccines that they're still working out, that's the other thing. People never realize, or they don't seem to remember that research is ongoing. And that, I think, is one of the problems for the initial hesitancy, was that people thought that it was almost like a shake and bake kind of thing. It's like, we need a vaccine. Okay, shake and bake. No, that information was already there. It's almost like if somebody surprises you and comes over and you actually have all the ingredients that you need to make a meal for the visitor. So science is always in research mode. There's always something being tested, not only for what issues and problems that we have and in the present, but also looking forward towards the future to make sure that we're not caught off guard. And even if something pops up, that we can get to a solution as fast as possible. I think that we really should be applauding the scientific community for having the tenacity to keep things going and having the imagination. I think that we should applaud the scientific community for having the tenacity to keep their heads down, especially these last several years where the scientific community has been under extreme hostility from the outside. But I never worried, because if anybody knows anyone who's medically inclined or medically in service, we tend to remain so focused. We don't realize that we have been attacked and we've got like several daggers in our backs until we finally come up for air. We're very focused on making sure that our patients, our staff, the community is safe and well. All right, definitely we'll be posting the link to the World Health Organization on our site, on all of our platforms, and I encourage you, I think, you guys, I think we all encourage you to go and take a look. When you're playing around on your phone, playing games and stuff like that, take a minute and check that out.
Well, I'd like to jump in just with one final thing on that thought. Dr. Fauci right now has been under attack for so long. People may not realize that back in the 80s when AIDS first hit, and nothing happened for us. We basically protested, fought back, and Dr. Fauci listened to us. At that time, it would take 20 years, 15 years for a drug to go into development, be tested, to be released. We were demanding speeded up access to medications because our people were dying.
Right.
Dr. Fauci heard us. He worked with us and changed the way drugs are developed in the pipeline.
And
Absolutely.
That said, the vaccine today, when people say, oh, it's just so fast, they don't realize the technology has been in use for 18 years already.
That's right. That's right. And this is what people don't understand when they're busy taking their Viking positions on one side, I'm on the other side. That AIDS study, that whole process that got us the vaccines or the medications, I should say, for HIV, that became another building block toward this vaccine.
As a matter of fact, that technology they started using now is working against the Zika virus, rabies,
exactly.
Ebola. I mean, it's amazing what they were able to take that and work it into other diseases.
Right, and I don't understand why it's so hard for people to understand that when we do things together, when we think of us as a whole and not just individuals, we're that much stronger.
Right.
If people didn't go and fight for every step of where we are right now, everything that has been fought for has been fought for, and now we can use those things to help us survive unforeseen issues. COVID-19 is not entirely unforeseen. I mean, especially in the medical community, we're always expecting something, you know. But and this, to tell you the truth, COVID-19 wouldn't have been so detrimental had it been taken care of right from the start.
Correct.
It was absolutely irresponsible, or the lack of response. It's like a medical malpractice. People would be in jail, lose their license, if we, as individuals, healthcare professionals, dealt in any way, shape, or form.
It's safe to say that if this had been a corporation, heads would have rolled a long time ago.
Not only heads would have rolled, there would be massive, the courts would be backed up with lawsuits everywhere. Okay,
Yep.
and that's the other thing too. This has to be addressed, and I personally feel that somebody has to be held accountable, because 500,000 people plus is not something that we need to sweep under the rug. This morning, I was moved because they were interviewing some healthcare workers, and they haven't done that in a little while, and just the loss.
Right.
I don't think anybody, you'll be long to find someone that says that they haven't been impacted at all by this. But
I hear a lot of people say that, though. They have not. I hear it all the time. I don't know a single person.
They don't know a single person that had it.
That's what they say.
Well, it doesn't always have to be about having COVID, because
But that's how anybody's impacted at all.
Right, that's the extreme thing. Most of us know somebody.
Oh yeah.
Died, not just had COVID, but they were talking about losing. This lady was talking about losing a coworker.
Yep.
Like an acquaintance coworker, right? The person walks by your desk, you say a couple of words, but it's consistent every day to the point where you all want to even call yourselves friends, but you just don't hang out, right? And she said the woman never stopped by her desk, and she got concerned, and she was like, oh, well, maybe she's on vacation, what we do when we're at work. And then her company was actually having memorials for the employees that died from COVID. So every month, I guess they started doing little candle vigil for the lost employees, and they named that lady that she was worried about, and she said it hit her so hard. People are not callous. People will do what they need to do to make things happen. The healthcare workers are exhausted. They're emotionally busy. Do you know what it's like to watch one person die in one night, let alone multiple people die in one night, and you're unable to do anything about it?
Yeah.
Will, I think you and I were in a very special position because of the place we worked at, which was a trauma center.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the average public realizes the stress that trauma physicians and nurses work under day in, day out. The suicide level rates for trauma workers is incredibly high. And they see it all the time. People dying, people being injured, people dying, and it just builds up. So you add COVID into the mix, it's very serious. And Dan, your daughter-in-law is a PA, right?
Yes. And she's very concerned about the virus and how people are reacting to it. Even some doctors. I don't feel comfortable getting into that part of it with her, but needless to say, she's not working any longer because she had to make a choice. And she used the education she had and the knowledge she had to make that choice, and I believe she did the right thing. On the other hand, I listen to people that say that they don't know anybody. I just lost my brother-in-law in December to COVID. He was the best man at my wedding, and I couldn't have gone home for the funeral if I wanted to. So when I hear people say, oh, it's a hoax, it's hyped up, well, then obviously you haven't had somebody in your life that perished from it.
I'm sorry to hear about your brother-in-law, Dan.
Yeah. He was a good guy, and he was healthy, and he didn't fight it.
Over 500,000 deaths say it's not a hoax.
Right.
We'll take a look at the possible reasons for this public mistrust and hesitancy during this pandemic. Stay with us.
RaceAware.
Welcome back. Thanks for hanging in there with us. All right, according to the CDC, we need to reach between 70 and 90% of the population to have immunity in order for us to reach herd immunity. After a rocky start, 96.4 million vaccines were delivered to healthcare centers across the country, and 76.9 million vaccines were administered to the public so far. Approximately 15% of the population have received at least one dose, while 7.7 have received the two-dose regimen. To date, there are 3 authorized vaccines. We have the Pfizer vaccine for ages 16 and up. That vaccine has a 90% efficacy. The Moderna for ages 18 and up, that vaccine also has a 90% efficacy. Both vaccines are 2 vaccine regimes. The new one, which came out about a week ago, is Johnson & Johnson. They don't even have a name for it yet. But it is 65% efficacy. Now, vaccines are tested, they're approved, and available. Yet there's still some public resistance. How do we find ourselves in this juncture with regards to hesitancy, especially within the marginalized population?
Well, that's a good question, Will. I wonder why there's some distrust. As I mentioned earlier, I had the polio vaccine, which Dr. Jonas Salk gets a lot of credit for. And that's a great thing, right? It saves a lot of people from having the Salk polio vaccine. What people don't realize is, though, that Dr. Jonas Salk and others actually experimented on mentally disabled people without their consent to get the vaccine to work. In the process of testing on humans without their consent, there were some severe adverse reactions, and some people died. And again, what they do, you tested on people without their consent, but also chose a population that could not consent or could not offer consent. They're mentally disadvantaged.
So they were disadvantaged. Were they wards of the state? What was that situation?
They were wards of the state. They were in state institutions. So it was a ready-made population, and some were as young as 4 years old. These were boys. Some were boys were 14 years old. You know, back in the day, we would call them mentally retarded. We don't say that word today, but that's basically the population that they were using. People with severe mental deficiencies who could not offer consent, did not know what was happening to them. And it was from sheer guinea pigs. And, you know, we praised Dr. Salk for what he did, and in many ways, he gets a lot of credit for what he did. He stopped polio pretty much in its tracks. But behind the scenes, it was the wrong way to do it. You know, I've mentioned before, we talk about World War II and Nazi Germany and Dr. Mengele and all those horrible experiments on the prisoners in concentration camps. Well, this goes back even further than that. So back in the 1880s, when leprosy hit, the island of Molokai was set aside as a leper colony. Well, at the same time, who knew? But gonorrhea and syphilis were raising themselves all across the country and the world, and doctors were looking for a way to deal with those sexually transmitted diseases. So what did they do? They went to Molokai, and they went to the leper colony, and they injected syphilis and gonorrhea into people in the leper colony. In some cases, actually put it right into their eyes to get into their system. Again, without consent. These people had no idea what was happening to them. And there was a lot of death, there was a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. So I would say, yes, there's a reason why marginalized populations, different groups of people are fearful, because we know how we've been treated, or other people have been treated in the past by so-called medical experts.
But let me ask you a question. I'm going to be a devil's advocate here, right? So
Sure.
I know a lot of experimentation was done in those forms. That's one of the reasons why worldwide there's ethical guidelines that have been set. But just to be a devil's advocate, is I'm feeling that something is whitewashed, because obviously when you're talking about these scientists and you're like, they were great, let's give them the Nobel Peace Prize, okay?
Oh, sure.
So the whitewashing that was done, obviously people shouldn't even know about this.
And it's come out years after the fact.
So do you think the average person is aware of these examples of unethical human research?
Oh, not at all. I wasn't even aware of it until I started researching this.
So that's what I'm asking. The average person isn't aware of that kind of that kind of atrocity, and the information's been whitewashed. Then why do we have such hesitancy? Is it because of more recent stories? Is it because of word of mouth from personal stories? What's going on?
I think in some ways, at least what I've seen, let's use World War II as an example. In school, when I was being taught history, it was the horrible German Dr. Mengele that did these experimentations. The U.S. came in, freed the concentration camps. We were the heroes. We saved these people. We don't do these awful things. Well, meanwhile, behind the scenes, yes, we were doing those awful things in the military, at the federal government level, and yet we don't talk about that. That's hidden from view. We did it.
Right, and the thing is, it's like people who are out of sight are used, right? So you have the prison population, institutionalized folks, orphanages, were used, and people who are considered invisible, right? So you have migrants, immigrants, you have marginalized population that at different times in the United States history were invisible, right?
Right.
You would agree with me that slaves were invisible.
Right.
Okay. So not many people know about Marion Sims. Marion Sims was even given the accolade father of gynecology. And basically, he used enslaved African women to experiment on live. We're not talking about pathology, like going in and studying the body after death. We're talking about studying live, using pathological procedure to study the organs of these women without anesthesia.
Without
anesthesia. And the thing is, it makes, when you listen to the stories, it's more than just getting the information, because there's something very sinister about this particular story, because he even went so far as to drug, or what do they call when people put the people on drugs, they turn them out or something? He drugged them out got them hooked and addicted on morphine. And what he would do, now he has the morphine, right? So he's not going to give them the morphine to do the test.
Right.
But he'll give them the morphine so that they could be strung out, and then they have to come back, and he won't give them the morphine until after the experimentation, and they endure all that pain.
Right.
So there's almost it's almost like an evil, sadistic penchant that these people have to hurt.
Well, it is evil. It's definitely evil. There's no other word for it. That's just it's beyond wrong.
I think too, it's also kind of an arrogance.
Yeah, it's an arrogance.
They're not as good as somebody else.
Or that believe it or not, especially with slaves or anybody that is not in the group that is making all the rules and regulations, right? I mean, people didn't think that the Indian people, the native Indian people had feelings.
Right.
How do you look at another human being and decide that their life is worth sacrificing for your study, your accolade,
your bank account?
Your bank account.
Oh, yeah.
I'm holding back, but thanks, Tony.
Sorry.
Your bank account. So we've come to a place where people's lives are just meant to be used to cash in.
Right.
You have one for us, Dan? You have one for us?
Continuing on the line of value, one thing that I think most people are a little bit knowledgeable of is the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, where they used 399 impoverished black males who had syphilis and did not give them treatment for the disease. And by 1947, they had penicillin. It was available. This continued on until 1972. That I didn't know.
That long.
It was very long, and even with intervention, they still refused to administer treatment. And the other point that made it even more disgusting is that these men were lied to. They were told that they were being given a treatment for their blood instead of being infected.
And they passed the syphilis on to their wives, their children.
Of course.
Because they were never given the medication to take care of it.
Of course.
And I think what interested me is because sometimes we only go so far back in our history to get the facts. But the fact of the matter is, this has been going on as far back as 1908.
This has been going on.
Dozens of children with tuberculosis.
Right.
And Dan, just for my clarification, this was our federal government that did this, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, the Tuskegee, yeah.
And so, just from those stories alone, and I hate to say it, but most people don't even know some of these stories. But I think most people know at least one. You know what I mean? That comes to mind if they want to be fearful about taking something like a vaccine or something like that. But I think along with past history, because we've gone through new vaccinations many times up until now, right? And people have basically gone and brought their kids. And, we have rules. People get vaccinated before they go to school. Sometimes you have to get booster shots before you can return to work,
right?
Especially in healthcare, So it's not just the history.
Right.
In the past, what we've had when we haven't had a pandemic like this, but we could have had a pandemic during the previous 8 years. However, the leadership was strong.
Yes.
We could have missed it altogether. If that group of people that set of leadership was not transparent to a certain degree, we could have never even known that it happened because they handled it with decisiveness.
Right.
So I think in this situation, the lack of strong leadership, that whole disorganized, ill-informed, nonchalant, irresponsible manner doesn't help people feel secure in putting their health or their life on the line for something that you're not explaining correctly. You don't seem to understand it yourself. It doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
There seems to be a line of thought where we can't handle the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
The people can't handle the truth, so we'll just lie to them.
Yeah, the truth, I think, I used to say, people seem to be allergic to the truth, Right. But that's been for a long time. America's gone through an evolution where the truth is really a problem. As a child, I remember making the comment that I noticed that people like to be lied to. People like to be lied to.
Yeah, I agree with that. I never thought of it that way, but you're right.
Mm-hmm. Well, another thing is the scattered misinformation. You've got misinformation everywhere. You've got this guy saying this, and people are listening to him, but he has no background or expertise in the information that he is spreading. So misinformation rather than scientific data.
Yeah.
Another thing is increasing isolation of individuals. Right? You have individuals who are basically on their phones, maybe on computers, or just isolated. People choose to be, before the COVID, people chose to be alone, chose to be isolated.
It's interesting because I've chosen isolation since last February for myself. And I would never have thought a social media site like Twitter would have been helpful for me. But I have formed incredibly close relationships. I found a group of people in Jacksonville, created my own little room, and we meet there every day, and we just use it to talk back and forth. And just that simple human contact. I don't see them, but they're there. I talk to them every day. Has kept me sane through the last 12 months. So there are ways of still isolating and still keeping human contact, keeping your sanity, and sharing your feelings. It's when you isolate in totality, that's where the problem really happens.
Right.
The rooms and the outreach that you and your friends on social media have done, that's actually really good. It's good for everybody. And believe me, I think just about all of America, probably the whole world, will tell you that if it wasn't for social media and those conference platforms, we'd probably all be bonkers by now.
Right.
Yeah.
But it also has a flip side to it. It also has a flip side to it where these same rooms are being utilized to propagate and disseminate misinformation, conspiracy theories, things that are basically extremely dangerous. When you're talking about health, you don't have room. It's not a game. You don't have room for that.
Right.
And then we also already mentioned the history of unethical experimentation in the United States.
Right. And that goes back as far as the early 1900s. I mean, I didn't, after reading this research, I had no idea that these even existed. I mean, going into orphanages and injecting these children with tuberculin and a virus that caused wart-like growths on them, and then a hospital with 146 patients that were injected with syphilis extract. I mean, this was in the early 1900s.
Wow.
I didn't even know that sort of thing happened back then.
It's just shocking.
If you look at when I was looking them up, there was so many that I just just looked over a couple of them, and they're really sickening. You know, you just really don't even want to continue reading them anymore. You know, it makes it very difficult to keep your faith in mankind, you know, when you read that stuff. But you know what? We're all about dealing with the truth. You know, we can't be like, you know, you can't handle the truth, like Tony said. We have to own up to it. That's the other thing too. We're not, as a country, this country has never owned up to anything that that was done. It's like they'll take the credit for everything that's good, but anything that's not good or detrimental or cause a problem or discriminatory or whatever it might be, people don't know how to be held accountable. And you know what? You don't have to be held accountable. You can be self-accountable.
Right.
You're grown. You don't need somebody, a big mama, to whoop your ass. You can hold yourself accountable.
That's right.
There was that horrible story last week about that young girl who needs brain surgery, and she's actually selling lemonade to raise money for her brain surgery, as well as a GoFundMe account.
Right.
And we're the richest country in the world, according to some people, the best health care in the world, and yet this family is selling lemonade to pay for their daughter's brain surgery when how many insurance companies are out there, and the average insurance CEO makes, $25 million a year? There's just something wrong. We've lost the humanity portion of whatever we're about. We've lost humanity.
Yeah, I agree with you. And not only that, but it seems that the idea of America was just smoke and mirrors, just an illusion.
Well, it was going to work well if you were a white landowner male.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's an illusion. Because, look, we have other countries that are trying to emulate America. They're doing it. Right? But America, who put out the whole philosophy and this is what we're about, this is great, we're going to do this, they're not doing it. It's a facade. Other countries actually are ahead of America on America's own philosophy.
And I think we're not on our border.
That doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
That's hypocrisy. That's what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hypocrisy.
And that's another show.
Yeah.
We have plenty to talk about. We're trying not to go sidebar crazy, you know?
Right.
When we come back after the break, how do we get back to normal? Can we ever really get back to normal? How do we get there? We've got a lot of work to do. Don't go away.
RaceAware.
Welcome back. Now we're actually going to have to talk about how we're going to get back to normal so that we can live maybe better than before COVID. What are you guys thinking? What do we have to do? Obviously, we have to do the basics, right?
Sure. Get the vaccine for sure.
Right.
And reinforce basic health strategies. I mean, one of the best things to come out of COVID is wash your damn hands. And wash your hands as many times as possible.
Right.
Knees into your arm. I mean, just basic things that those of us who work within the hospital system or health system know. Now more people are aware of it, and I think that's a really good thing. But wash your hands.
Right. So we have to, I think the first thing is, because we're actually in this battle with COVID, so the first thing that we have to do, which will include you washing your hands and all that, is to actually have an organized national plan. No more this county is doing this other county is using snake oil, the other county is just doing whatever they want, traveling, going to the next county and infecting people. No, we have to have an organized national plan. And what I like what's going on is that this is becoming a national plan, but it has to be dynamic in implementation because
that's been our biggest failure. Having 50 separate states come up with their own plan, and using just Florida as an example, our governor said, "Oh well, you know what? Every county come up with their own plan." So Palm Beach is different than Duval, than Clay, than Manatee. It's just insane. We need one national plan.
Yeah, I mean that actually was the shot in the foot.
Yes.
All right, because that was never going to work.
No.
Well, that's because somebody didn't want to take responsibility for it and pawned it off on the governors.
I'm just laughing because the way Dan said that.
He's referring to me. I know he's talking about me. It's okay.
No. I'm trying to be.
He who shall remain unnamed.
Yeah, exactly. That's your vote.
Which now, thank God, we have that in evolution and flux and already implemented. We also need extreme education. We don't just need education in this country. We need extreme education. What was those reality shows, those extreme athletic shows?
Right.
We need an extreme education plan in this country. Okay, we have to have a unified, fact-based message and information, period.
Well, we also have to learn from our mistakes. And we have to learn to admit that we made mistakes along the way. That's the only way we're going to be able to correct them.
That's right.
You know, my favorite phrase is, we practice medicine, and I think that's very true, because it's not a known factual thing every single day. We practice it because it changes.
Right.
We're perfecting it. And just like with science, things are going to change. So with COVID, when it first came out, there was this, we don't need to wear masks. And we realized, oh no, this truly is airborne the way it is. Masks may be helpful. Then we found out, yes, masks do help. So the messaging changed, and people got upset because the messaging changed, but that's the way science works. We learn and we implement. We learn and we implement.
Well, I'm going to take you back. Everything that you said is true in the chronological order of how things happen, but let's go back to the very beginning with the mask. That information about not wearing the mask from the beginning wasn't made because of scientific reasons. It was made because of political reasons, because there wasn't enough masks to go around. And rather than come out and just say there isn't enough masks, people, make your own mask, use a scarf, use any form of protection, because we need to redirect these masks to the healthcare workers and the first line employees, the essential employees that are having to deal with this face-to-face until we step up and get more resources. it was never a good idea not to wear masks.
Right.
Okay? And Dr. Fauci is being nice about it by not going back and saying, well, this is what I was told. But that's exactly what it is.
Right.
I stand corrected, and you're right.
No, you don't have to be correct. You're just repeating the chronology of what happened. That's exactly what happened. But that's not why it happened. It's not because that was, the scientific. You're going to tell me with all the advances that scientists, a first-year medical student, an AP high school student could tell you that you needed to wear masks.
Right. The sad thing is, my next-door neighbor is a NICU nurse, and I cannot tell you the number of times she came home sobbing her eyes out. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she's like, they're not giving us masks. They will not give us masks. I can't bring my own mask in. And their rationale was they didn't want the parents of the kids in the NICU to be more fearful by seeing the nurses wear masks.
Oh, my God.
That went on for 2 months before they realized that yes,
but
to wear
now
masks.
you understand, it's not because of what is happening. It's because of something else.
It was a perception in that case, right. And she was just terrified.
Right.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
It's very terrifying.
Another thing that we have we have to fix the inequities. Okay, there's a lot of inequities, whether it's economic, medical, everything. America wouldn't have been so hard hit if it was a more equitable system.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I'm so hard on learning from our mistakes is it's happening right now in South Florida. We've got people coming down here for spring break. They're not going to wear masks. A lot of them aren't wearing them already. With everything we've been through this past year, the one thing we know is a mask will protect you. And they're coming down here in droves. It just makes my heart sick.
That is sickening.
I love Canadians. I love Canada. And the snowbirds that do come down to Florida, a lot are from Canada. With the border closed, they figure out ways to get around that. They can ship their car across the border, and they helicopter from Toronto to Niagara Falls in the U.S., and that totally eliminates all the restrictive travel agreements. And then they get in their car, and they drive to Florida. And it costs them thousands of dollars to do it, but they're doing it because they want to get out of the cold. So there's always a way to break a loophole, and I love my Canadians. I'm not slamming Canada, but people always find a way to break the rules.
Yeah.
And you're right, Tony. We have to stop blaming big government all the time and take some responsibility for our own actions.
That's right.
It's not the government that's twisting these people's arms to come down here for spring break. That's their own accord. So they have to start taking responsibility.
Right. Or just it's different when you're 18 years old. You're invincible. When you're 65 years old, you've got a couple $100,000 in the bank, and you can afford a helicopter and shipping a car. There's a huge difference in responsibility and accountability.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah, the accountability is what's really lacking, and pushback. Because if we were in a position where let's use Palm Beach, right? All these people are coming down there. If Palm Beach was able to shut down, now you can't even have a good vacation. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right. So there's no real consequences. And a lot of times people who do what they want, they're not the ones who suffer the consequences. Usually they leave a problem for other people
to
have to deal with. We need clear and enforceable ethical guidelines, and I think we need watchdogs. So we're supposed to be individuals, like Dan just said, people have to start taking more responsibility. You can't just leave everything to the government. Obviously we did that, and we've had many years of pilfering, switching, and making policies that actually hurt the people who send the politicians to Washington to take care of things. So we have to be the watchdogs, no matter what it is. If it's politics, if it's medical research, we have to take some responsibility. Government wasn't meant to be a career.
No, it was not.
Right. Government was meant, the positions in government were meant to be the civilian equivalent of the military. Everyone should be able to serve in politics as a service to the country. It was never meant to be a career.
Right. And obviously the perks are good enough that, because they could leave Congress, they could leave the Senate and get a lobbying job somewhere and make even more money, but the perks must be so good that they'll spend millions of dollars to stay in that seat.
It's they want to stay in that seat because they're probably doing things that they're not supposed to do. You know, they're probably making money under the table.
I would never say
the emollients clause. There's a reason. It's not just because you can't. You know, Nancy Pelosi cracked me up when she said, you know, I don't know. The reporter asked her, why are they fighting so hard to stay in office? And she says, I don't know. Maybe they can't get another job.
Yeah.
I was like, get out, deadbeat. You can get another job.
Oh, yeah.
All right. All right, so another thing I think people need to really take personal accountability, like we mentioned before. Research facts yourself, you know. It's not going to kill you. If you can spend countless hours playing games on your smartphone, taking selfies ad nauseum, you can research something, okay, that could impact your life or kill a family member, all right? So just look things up. If you hear something, look it up. And please look it up before you think you can get into a conversation about it.
And I like to look up several sites. You know, remember the great routine when they asked Sarah Palin what newspapers you read, and she said all of them?
Right, right.
Well, I'm a news junkie, and admittedly, I may lean more towards liberal side than middle of the road or conservative side, but I watch them all. I watch Onan, I watch Fox, I watch BBC, I watch Al Jazeera, I watch CBS, ABC, NBC, CNBC, MSNBC, CNN, and that way I can take all this information in and I try and make an informed decision. I just don't watch one. Watch them all. Use your brain.
Exactly. I think when you listen to the news, when you look up news, or even just factual information about a particular subject, you do need to look at more than one source, and whether the information is positive or negative, you need to just take it all in.
Right.
Because in medicine, you know what that's called when you make a decision based on all the information? It's called being informed. Okay, so when a doctor is telling you what the path is going forward after a diagnosis, he or she tells you the good, the bad, the ugly. Mm-hmm. And now you can make or give informed consent, knowing that if you take the right path, XYZ could happen. If you take the left path, XYZ can happen. If you jump off the roof, XYZ can happen. Informed consent. So when you're getting ready to go and vote, let's say, you should research the people. You're not, picking donuts from Dunkin' Donuts. You just don't go in and go, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, all right, or that flavor is my best flavor. Mm-hmm. Who is representing what you need in order that your life can be improved along with the people that you live in your community with?
Right.
If somebody is offering something or saying something that is going to improve your life and your life alone, that might not be the best person to vote for. Because if your life is the only life that's improved, and everybody else goes down, then everyone goes down. It doesn't work if only a few are okay, and then the majority are not.
I've never understood how somebody will vote against their own best interest.
Exactly. Voting against your own best interest. But be informed. Know who you're voting for. I've met so many people that they can't tell you who was on the ballot, but they were going to vote.
Right.
They didn't know that a particular bill was was on the ballot, and when you go in, you might not read it right. You might not understand it, but you're already in there. What are you going to do? So you might vote against your best interest because you took a guess.
Dan, your first election, the first election that you voted in, have you voted also not just on the federal level, but state, local, voted for dog catchers?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was so excited about being able to vote for the first time. It was a different, it shouldn't be a different time, but it was. We didn't have the information at our fingertips like we do now. You had to research. And if you didn't, what they told you, you accepted as the truth. And most of us back then didn't accept that. That's why we did march on Washington. That's why we did carry signs. That's why we got kicked in the stomach a few times, because we didn't accept it. Nowadays, we've become very spoiled, and we want everything handed to us on a silver platter, and we don't want to do the work. Well, look what happens when you don't.
Exactly.
Because I know people will vote for the president, but they are like, oh, I'm not going to waste my time voting for school board, or I'm not going to waste my time voting for the water commissioner. And yet, those positions usually start off meaning nothing, but there's a springboard to the next level, the next level, the next level. And then before you know it, you know, the moral majority had a 20-year plan. And that's how they got into the power, because they started at the local level and worked their way up. But anyway, I digress.
You're right. No, but you're right. And I was just going to say, you're talking about the voting aspect, but a step before that, there are positions that don't even have a challenger.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, that's not democratic.
No.
You know, and when the positions don't have a challenger, especially on the local level, the person that's running is not trying to, you know, sound the alarm bell because they just want to win by default. So if we don't get involved in what is ours, this system is ours. We're not invited to participate. We are the system.
Yeah, absolutely.
The next thing we have to do is follow the safety guidelines, you know, social distancing, masking, you know, like Tony was talking about, and Dan, hand washing. Make sure you follow those guidelines still, even after you've taken your vaccine, because it's not just about you, it's also about protecting others. Keep on top of the CDC vaccine designation schedule. Some of you probably don't know that, but it's on the news. Sometimes they go through it, and sometimes they just mention it. But I'm going to quickly go through it for you, so at least you won't have to look that up, but you should keep on top of it because it is going to change. The CDC has designated 3 groups, and these groups are going to be vaccinated first. The Phase 1A group, which is the healthcare personnel, long-term facility residents. Phase 1B, frontline essential workers, which include firefighters, postal workers, and food and agricultural people over the age of 75. Phase 1C, people 65 to 74, people between the ages of 16 to 64 with underlying health conditions that put them at risk or higher risk for the COVID-19. Other essential workers, including people in food service, public service, transportation, and construction. And I'm noticing that they didn't mention teacher. Okay, no. I think teachers should have been in that last group.
And you know, personally, I would have taken it a step further. If you take a hospital worker, whether it be a nurse, a doctor, a food service worker, a person in your room, I think everybody who's in the hospital should be vaccinated.
Oh, yeah.
And I would have taken it a step further, and I would have done their families as well, because they're. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry. They're critical to the operation of the hospital.
Yeah, it's hard because they're waiting. People are working under duress all the time. Remember in the beginning, some of the healthcare workers didn't see their families for 2 months,
right,
or better, because they were afraid to bring it home.
Yep.
Right.
All right, guys. So as usual, everything that resources that we've used, we're going to include the links so that you have access to them. Don't forget to look us up first, because at least those links are there, and then you can branch out from there. What are we going to say about the last word? What have we learned about ourselves, the country, during this whole experience, guys?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, I'll just say this. I've learned, and perhaps I'm taking a cynical approach, but we're a lot more selfish than I thought we were going to be. I'm really tired of the Constitution says that no, the Constitution does not say you're entitled to not wear a mask. The Constitution does not say the stuff I'm hearing. Have respect for yourself. Have respect for your fellow citizens. Mask up, man up, woman up, whatever it's going to be. Just do the right thing. It's not going to hurt you to put a piece of fabric over your mouth and nose and wear it correctly. That said, I think we're incredibly resilient as a people.
I think what I've learned, and it's not quite as cerebral, I've learned how much I miss certain people in my life. I have 2 little grandsons that it was over almost a year before I was able to give them a hug. When I visited, I had to stay outside and talk on a phone through a patio door. It killed me. So it made me stop and think. And I see this all the time on TV, these grandparents that are crying their eyes out because they haven't been able to see their grandchildren. And they're growing up.
Right.
That's what I've learned. I've learned not to take that for granted.
Wow. Yeah. Sometimes we're so busy fighting we forget the emotional part, you know?
Right.
Well, for me, I'm just going to be just extremely general about it. I just feel that we really need to put the United back in the United States of America. Anything less is going to render us a weak and impotent nation. All right, on behalf of myself, my wonderful co-hosts, and crew, I thank you for spending this time with us on RaceAware. Please remember to visit our website at www.raceaware.rock. That's RaceAwareRockS. And make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Until next time, stay safe and race aware, because truth matters.
Politics, protests, human rights, justice, equity, community. RaceAware.